Okay, so we're diving into some pretty interesting stuff today.
Yeah, definitely.
We were talking about Ross Coulthart and all the stuff he's been saying about UAPs.
Right, all the recent interviews he's done and even some of his Twitter threads.
Exactly. We're going to try to break down exactly what he's saying and what it all means.
Yeah, because he's been at the heart of this for so long now.
Yeah.
So when he says something, it's worth listening to.
It carries weight for sure.
Yeah.
So he drops this bomb, right? He says, we could have confirmation of non-human intelligence interacting with Earth, like, within the next year or two.
Yeah, 12 to 18 months is his timeline.
I mean, that's right around the corner.
Yeah, it is. And the thing is, he's very specific that this isn't just like, some random prediction.
Right.
He ties it directly to the National Defense Authorization Act.
The NDAA.
Yeah, specifically those UAP reforms that are part of it, what they're calling the Schumer Amendment.
Right.
He seems to see it as like this double-edged sword.
Yeah. Okay. I'm interested to dig into that a little more because on the one hand, we have this potential for real transparency, maybe for the first time.
Yeah, finally getting some answers.
Right. But then on the other hand, Coulthart seems really worried about these loopholes that could actually make things even more secretive.
Oh, absolutely. And the big one he keeps coming back to is this thing called the Presidential Records Review Panel.
Okay, yeah, what is that exactly? I'm not super familiar with how that works.
So basically, it's this panel that has the power to review and potentially redact information that they deem, a threat to national security.
Oh.
Which, on the surface sounds reasonable enough, right?
Right, you'd expect there to be some kind of process for protecting sensitive information.
Exactly, but Coulthart's concern, and it's shared by a lot of people, is that this panel could essentially become like a giant rubber stamp.
Oh, you mean like they could just stamp classified on anything, even if it's not really about national security, just to keep it hidden?
Exactly, and that's what's so worrying about it. It's like this back door they could use to just completely undermine the whole point of the UAP reforms.
So it's like this weird catch-22 we're in, right? We finally have the potential for some real disclosure, but at the same time, they're building in these mechanisms to keep things buried.
Yeah. It's like they're saying they want transparency, but only on their terms,
Right. And it makes you wonder what is it they're so afraid of getting out there. And it's not just the NDAA stuff either. He also drops this other bombshell about the Intelligence Community Inspector General, the ICIG.
Right.
He claims that they're actively investigating David Grush's whistleblower claims.
Yeah. And not just investigating like in a, we'll look into it kind of way.
Right.
But like they've actually interviewed people who claim to have seen and even touched these recovered craft.
He even uses the word biologics. Yeah. Which is, that's a whole other level.
Yeah, that one really makes you think, doesn't it? Because it suggests that we're not just talking about technology here.
Right. This is getting into some really strange territory.
Absolutely.
So the fact that the ICIG is involved at all, that seems like a pretty big deal.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this isn't just some fringe investigation.
Yeah.
This is the real deal.
Right. And if they're hearing firsthand testimony about recovered craft and possibly even something biological, that lends a lot of weight to Grush's claims.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely a huge development in all of this.
It's like all of a sudden this went from being a fringe conspiracy theory to something that's being taken very seriously at the highest levels.
Absolutely. And it's about time.
Yeah. I mean, we've been talking about this stuff for years and it's always been dismissed as nonsense, but now it feels like the tide is finally turning.
It really does. And I think a lot of that is thanks to people like Coulthart, who've been pushing for answers and refusing to be silent.
Right. And it's not just him either. There are other credible people coming forward now with similar stories.
Yeah. It's becoming harder and harder to ignore. And that's a good thing, because we deserve to know the truth no matter how strange or unsettling it might be.
Absolutely. That's what gets me, though, that word biologics. It's like he's hinting at something truly alien.
Right. And this is where it feels like Coulthart knows so much more than he can say.
Totally. He even admits he's catching heat from the UFO community for not just like spilling all the beans.
Yeah, he's definitely in a tough spot.
Yeah.
Bound by legal stuff, probably ethical considerations too.
Wow, for sure. But you can tell it's killing him. He wants to get this information out there, but he wants to do it responsibly.
Yeah, you can't just go around revealing national secrets, even if you think it's for the greater good.
Exactly. But still, it's like, come on, man, throw us a bone here.
Right.
And he kind of does, though. It's more like crumbs than a full meal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, just little hints here and there.
Like he mentions this massive recovered craft hidden under some building. And get this, it's not even in the U.S.
Really?
Yeah, and he says just revealing the location of this thing would cause like a Storm Area 51 situation times 100.
Wow. Okay, so this is something else entirely then.
Right. It makes you wonder what could possibly be so sensitive about its location.
Yeah, if it's not even on U.S. soil, that adds a whole other layer to it, too.
Exactly. Who are they working with? What kind of agreements are already in place?
Right. It's like the deeper you go, the stranger it gets.
And then there's that other comment he makes about allegations of murder being just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, I caught that one, too.
It's like, how can there be anything more sensitive than that?
It's really disturbing when you think about it.
It is, and it makes you wonder, what are they so afraid of?
Like, what could be so bad that it makes murder seem like small potatoes?
Right. And Coulthart doesn't really elaborate, but he does talk about the implications of this recovered technology.
Yeah, especially if it's something like advanced propulsion or directed energy weapons.
Right. And, I mean, that makes sense on one level. If you stumble across technology that could revolutionize warfare, you'd want to keep it under wraps.
Of course. But at what cost, right? At what point does that secrecy become more dangerous than the technology itself?
Exactly. And he's not just talking about hypothetical threats either. He implies that there might have already been aggressive actions, even attacks.
You think he's hinting at something specific there?
It's hard to say, but he's definitely implying that this isn't just a passive observation game anymore.
Right, like we're not just watching from the sidelines, we're somehow involved.
Exactly. And if that's true, then the public deserves to know what's going on.
Absolutely. We can't make informed decisions about our future if we're kept in the dark about threats that could literally be coming from another world.
And that's where he really goes after the media.
Yeah, he's not happy with how they're covering this whole thing.
Not at all. He calls out the lack of serious investigative journalism, and honestly, I think he has a point.
I do too. There's too much reliance on official statements and not enough digging deeper.
Exactly, and he specifically points to those February 2023 UAP shootdowns as a prime example.
Right. He keeps saying there's more to that story than we've been told.
Way more, especially that Alaska incident. It's like they're just not being straight with us.
It's frustrating because we're dealing with something potentially huge here, and we're being treated like children who can't handle the truth.
And the thing is, he's not just complaining about it, he's actually doing something about it, right? Like, he's got that new investigation with News Nation looking into those February shootdowns.
Yeah, that's right. He's really digging into that Alaska incident, especially. Seems like he's found some interesting stuff.
It feels like he's trying to expose what really went down.
Oh, he definitely is.
Yeah.
And he's got that updated version of his book coming out, too, in plain sight.
Right.
With a whole new chapter on the shootdowns.
I mean, that's what I find so interesting about Coulthart. He's not just connecting these dots between government secrecy and this groundbreaking technology and even the possibility of, hostile actions.
Yeah.
He's then going out and trying to find answers himself.
He's following the evidence wherever it leads, even if it leads to some pretty uncomfortable conclusions.
Like that whole thing he talks about with cognitive dissonance.
Exactly. It's like we're living in this weird moment where you're facing all these very real problems here on Earth.
Right. Climate change, political instability, all that stuff.
Exactly. And at the same time, we have this incredible, almost unbelievable story about potential non-human contact unfolding right in front of us.
It's a lot to process, for sure.
It really is like it's almost too much for our brains to handle.
Like we're on the verge of something huge, something that could change everything, but most of the world is still stuck on autopilot.
And that's why I think Coulthart's work is so important right now. He's trying to bridge that gap, to wake people up to the magnitude of what's happening.
Right. He's saying, hey, this is bigger than all of us. We need to start paying attention.
Exactly. And he argues that if even a fraction of what he's suggesting is true, then we need leadership, not more secrecy and misinformation.
We need to come together and figure this out as a species.
Exactly. Because the decisions we make now could have consequences that last for generations.
It's true, and that brings us to, I think, maybe the most important question Coulthart raises in all of this.
Okay, what's that?
He suggests that the U.S. might have already taken offensive action against a non-human intelligence.
Yeah, he doesn't elaborate on that, but just putting it out there is huge.
It's terrifying if you really think about it.
It is, because if his sources are correct, and that's a big if, but if they are, then we're not just talking about observing or reverse engineering anymore.
Right, it's escalated way beyond that.
We're talking about potential conflict, not with another nation, but with something entirely outside our understanding.
So where does that leave us? I mean, what are we supposed to do with all of this?
I think if you were to ask Coulthart, he'd probably say the first step is awareness.
Okay.
We can't afford to ignore this anymore. We can't just bury our heads in the sand.
So what do we do?
We demand transparency from our leaders. We support real investigative journalism, and we prepare ourselves for the possibility that our place in the universe is far more complex and potentially dangerous than we ever imagined.
It's like we're standing at the edge of the unknown. We have no idea what's out there, but we know it's going to change everything.
And maybe that's the biggest takeaway from all of this. We need to be asking ourselves some tough questions, not just about what's out there, but about our own role in this unfolding story. And we need to be prepared for answers that might challenge everything we thought we knew about ourselves and our place in the cosmos.
It's a lot to think about, but it's a conversation we need to be having.
Absolutely. It's time to wake up and face the unknown together.